Good afternoon. This is Kim Bobby, and I from ACE, and I want to welcome you to the Network Revitalization and Succession Planning webinar. Before we get started, I'm going to read to you the technical support information. And for technical assistance, please dial 202-939-9700. Question and answer. To ask a question, simply type your question into the Q&A panel on the lower right side of your screen and submit to the host. That is us, and I will read your question for Patricia. You can hear audio for this webinar two ways. Audio broadcast. You will automatically be connected to the audio broadcast by joining the webinar. Please make sure your volume is turned on and adjusted to an audible level. Teleconference. You may call in to hear the audio by telephone. All telephone lines have been muted. To join via telephone, dial 877-668-4490 and then enter access code /meeting number 626609122. Archive. This webinar is being recorded. A recording of this web event will be available within 5 business days of the conclusion of this event. Now I would like to introduce Patricia Verlaud, Dr. Patricia Verlaud, and thank her for all the great work that she does to support the New York State Network and also the Moving the Needle Initiative. Thank you so much, Patricia, for joining us and hosting this webinar, Revitalizing Our Networks, the 11 Essential Matrices.
Oh, thank you very much, Kim, and thank you for offering me the honor and privilege to contribute my little part to revitalizing our network, and I'm hoping that I will be able to answer all potential questions from our attendees here. So let me just start by presenting myself just a little bit more. I'm the Dean of Global Academic Programs at New York Tech, and I'm right now the immediate path coordinator for the New York State Women's Network, meaning that what you are probably going through is probably what I have gone through also in the past. So any question you may have, feel free to answer them. Feel free to ask them. I will try to answer as many as I can during these webinars. But of course, if there are more specific questions, I will offer to liaise with you directly for one-to-one conversation if needed. So no problem. So let's start. So when I started, I was probably, how can I say? I could say, okay, I was just thrown in the pool and asked to learn how to swim, or this is really what I felt my network like when I started, meaning it was a nice group of women, but the network itself was quite dormant, and I felt a little bit unstabilized by the amount of work that needed to be done to just make sure that this network would be sufficiently engaged and aligned with the goal of the ACE Women's Network. So today, what we will talk is what are from different conversations I had with Kim, with my presidential sponsor then, or my liaison with the Executive Council. What are really the essential criteria that makes a network engaged? And so measuring toward those criteria will help you probably figure out what is your current state and where you need to put some improvement in your journey to an engaged network. But let's see first, what is your mood today? So just after that particular slide, I would like to engage you in a poll. And this poll, I would like to ask you a few questions. First of all, you can see I am in the mood, I'm feeling like I am, not sure where to start. You just answer true or false to this one. So let's try. You can see on your right the polling table. Just click on the answer you think is the most appropriate to your mood at the moment. I am not sure where to start. Second, I feel like I'm getting sufficient help from my group. Your group meaning your planning group, your committee, your board, your steering group. There are many ways to qualify your group, so just choose the group that you are coordinating itself, and let's see if you feel that you're getting or not sufficient help from that group. Third one, I'm not getting sufficient help from ACE network. Is it your perception that you're not getting this help? And if so, we need to know so we can help you much better. Fourth, I feel like I'm dealing with poor planning group meeting attendance. Does that ring a bell? It may be possible. It's a sign of something. So we need to identify, first of all, if you are dealing with this particular issue and how to help you circumvent that. And 5, I'm stuck with no or insufficient structure, meaning that I'm not exactly sure what we should do, how we are building our group properly, if it's built in a way that does address everything we need to do. So basically, I hope that you have already answered those questions. Do we have some results? Okay, let's see. Do we have some results from the poll? I'm not seeing any results so far.
Yes, you do. You should be able to see that, Patricia.
Okay. I see the questions, but I'm not sure I see the results. Okay, so what do you see?
Okay, for not sure, question number 1, we have 11%.
Okay.
And, well, 2 people are said false. That's 22%, no answer, 6. Not getting sufficient help from my group. We have 3 that said false and 6 that didn't answer. Question number 3. Question number 3, not getting sufficient help from the ACE Women's Network. We had 2 that said false and 7 that did not answer. Dealing with poor planning group meetings, we have 2 that said false and 7 with no answer. Stuck with no or insufficient structure, we had 1 that said false and 8 that had no answer.
Okay.
I don't know if we didn't give everybody enough time, but that's what we have from that poll. So we just keep moving forward.
Okay, so let's move forward, and I'm seeing that probably these will be some questions we need to deal with at some point, and maybe not answering may also signal that maybe the questions are really diffuse so far. So let's move into some more details. Where to start? We have to be strategic when we start on the job. Have you already performed some sort of, you call it SWOT analysis or 360 assessment of your group environment, of course, but basically, have you analyzed carefully the landscape of your group, meaning that do you have identified your strengths honestly and your weaknesses honestly as well? Have you set up your goals with the group? Maybe ideally these goals should be set up with the group, but in some cases, are they more your personal goals for the group? Maybe a combination of both? How much time have you for your coordination mandate? Is it a 2-year? Is it a 3-year? In that particular, with this particular timeline in mind, do you think that you will have sufficient time to achieve your goals? And in what measure will you tell you that you have achieved your goals? Meaning that it's really important that you understand not only to have goals, not only to work toward those goals, but to make sure that your work has been efficient enough. So you have to measure what has been done in a nice way. And basically at the end, from now to the end of your mandate and with your goals in mind and having your action plan and your timeline, what do you need to really get where you want to be? So this is also identifying your needs. So at this point, I would like to go through the 11 essential metrics I just mentioned, that to make sure that you are going to the accomplishment of your goals in a successful way, you need to measure properly everything that you're doing in a proper way. So we have identified those 11 potential measures. But of course, the first one is really obvious. Is your state, does your state have a state coordinator? Maybe. But in some cases, generally yes, but in some cases, for instance, there is an interim state coordinator because there is no one who is really to step up to the role. If you are really the coordinator right now, or maybe the interim one, do you clearly know what is your role? Do you know that you need really to be the liaison between your state, your institutional representative, and the staff of the Inclusive Excellence Group? Do you know that you need to make sure that you provide a regular communication with the Executive Council? Do you know that you have to provide the leadership for your state planning group or planning committee or executive board? Do you support the mission and the vision and the principle of the ACA Women's Network? All these kind of facets of your role, which is quite complex, in fact, in this leadership sphere. You will, of course, make sure that you understand every facet of it. And to help you in that, you will have, of course, to refer quite much to the State Coordinator Handbook, which is provided by ACA Women's Network. You will have, of course, I just provided the link to it right now. It will be back on the resource page at the end of this webinar as well. Have you progressively been grown into that role, or have you just said yes because no one else wanted it? I just wanted to offer my personal experience on that. I was nominated by the presidential sponsor of the New York State and the Executive Council board liaison for New York State, Delaware, and New Jersey, because we met at a conference. And we met at a conference, and I was at a regional conference, at the New York State conference for ACA Women's Network. And I was really interested in knowing about the network itself. I had a whole story about that. But they just approached me and they say, okay, we can't find anyone to lead that particular network. Would you be able to do it? I say, I have no idea if I will be able, but I want to try. And so I have not been grown into that role, but I had to learn. And so if you are in this particular position right now, this is not impossible. This is something we are all here to help you to progress in that role. So let me continue. The second metric is, of course, to make sure that you have a functioning board or planning group or executive board or steering committee, whatever you name it. So these are essential questions and sometimes tricky questions as well. I'm pretty sure that at some point one or the other from the group here on this webinar have probably thought carefully about that. Are all your board members actively engaged? And the word the qualifier actively is really important. How is the attendance to meeting? Is it spotty? Is it very difficult? Do you have to send constant reminders all the time? Do you think that people are experience some sort of a meeting fatigue. And in that case, if you have identified board members who are not actively engaged, and in some cases may jeopardize the good work of the others by, putting their heels in the ground when you are trying to do something and engage people, do you know how to graciously separate from these non-active board members? This is a delicate question. If you are in a leadership role now or in the future in higher education or in any other setting, there will be a moment where you will have to take very tough decisions and difficult decisions. So how can we do that in a nice way, sufficiently graciously, and without, cutting bridges? This is something that we need to think carefully about. And I know that also for a fact because when I started with a board where there were 11 people, and all of them except 2 of them were absolutely not actively engaged, and I had to progressively separate from 9 of these people who were great ladies at various aspects, but they were not engaged, and I couldn't do any quality work with the group with having those members sitting in the board. Do you have an intentional recruitment strategy for your board, meaning that
Patricia, we have a question.
Oh, please.
This question is about when board members only participate for a specific event. How do you handle that when they're only committed to certain parts of the network work?
Okay. So basically, I think, and we will come back to a larger question, which is really what does provide a structure for your board, which are really the bylaws and internal policies and regulations. It's very important to understand that a board member has a specific mandate, and the specific mandate not only a mandate time, but also a mandate charge. Meaning that if the board member is supposed to attend the meeting for discussing matters that all members have to vote on, this board member should be reminded very nicely but firmly that she has to attend those meetings. Otherwise, it may be considered as a reason for separating from that particular board member, and just ask her if she's interested in only part of the job of that. She can be an invited guest or a supporting guest for this type of events, for instance, that she loves to be in. It's a little bit delicate, but I would say one of the strategies that may be used is really to look carefully at the bylaws that you have and insert in these bylaws a very specific description, job description for each position at the board. And if the person is not fulfilling those descriptions, then you will have also a clause for separation. So that's one thing. Before going that far, of course, a one-to-one discussion with this particular person, explaining her why her input is absolutely necessary in all decisions that are taken on behalf of the board. So it may be very delicate. It depends on the coherence of the group. It depends on the context and the landscape of the state network. I can offer to the person who asked this question a follow-up meeting one-on-one with me, so we can discuss this specific case, and I'll be more than happy to discuss it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, I was asking, do you have an intentional recruitment strategy? Again, when you have vacant seats on a board, what do you do? Are you just recruiting someone because someone else told you that she would be a wonderful person to add? or do you think that this person has the kind of skills that are missing on your board and that the whole board could benefit from? Just as an example, when I was nominated, as a coordinator, I didn't have any particular treasurer, so I needed to have someone with those skills. But I choose to recruit this particular person as one of the current CFO or controller of institutions around me. I wanted this person to have those skills already as a preset. For our communication, I appointed someone. We appointed someone which was a communication and marketing person. For all our information technology position and information officer, we hired someone who was already in the field. So having someone who has already the skill that you need at the board in her current position, it's kind of, there has two good effects on that. The first one is, of course, you benefit from the top-notch kind of competencies in the field. And secondly, it doesn't add too much work on the shoulder of the person you are recruiting, because she's just expanding or extending her help in areas that she knows already very well. So I think it's a double benefit. It's a benefit from the board, and it's a benefit from the person you are hiring to. And of course, sometimes we all need a little push as coordinator. And this little push can come from two sources. The first source is really very important, is your presidential sponsor. So do you have a presidential sponsor is really the first question. I know that in certain states there may be one or maybe more than one presidential sponsor, and there may be either male or female president. It doesn't really matter as long as they provide really helpful assistance to you. But in which way? I think that, first of all, it's very likely that if you have been nominated as the state coordinator, it's probably because one of your presidential sponsor. It's also extremely important to have someone who supports you for nominating women in higher education senior level position. He or she has their own network, and they know exactly who to approach to signal to the institution you're applying for instance, that you would be a tremendous candidate. So that's really very important too. She also, or he also, can provide a lot of support from, moral support, mentorship, which is really important in your role of state coordinator, because there are some instances where you feel a little bit alone and you need to hear a reassuring voice about, am I really on the right track? Have done everything that I could, or should I think about something else I have to do? And she can also, or he can provide some sort of a logistical support when it comes to organizing events, short events, or state board retreats, for instance. This is extremely important. And so you don't have to worry too much about the logistics. She can, or he can, take care of that. And on another hand, you have another type of support. And I put Yoda here because I think it's the wisest man on earth, or man, it's maybe I'm overextending this qualification, but generally your executive council liaisons are much nicer than Yoda, but they are as wise as he is. So I value extremely much their advice. I have been in constant communication with Dr. Conchita Stewart, who was the liaison for New York, State of New York, State of Delaware, and State of New Jersey. And because of a regular conference call with the three of us, it was a fantastic ID sharing moments and cross-fertilization of ideas and suggestions between our three states. And it became evident at some point that we were so aligned and so in sync on many things that we could organize with, minimum support, I would say minimum financial support from anyone, but we could organize our first Mid-Atlantic multi-state conference held in New York last November. So it was a huge success, but it couldn't have been a success without those particular conference calls and fantastic ID sharing. This liaison can also provide you with a lot of mentorship. She can also nominate people for, senior level position as well. And I think that it's great. I can also recommend you for work on statewide committees. And also she can recommend you to the Inclusive Excellence Group for work done at different committees as well. So that's really good. So let's continue for now a session of a little question. What should I do too? So in those particular questions here, I have the first question is here: foster women's interest in our network in the first place. What I would like to ask you is just to answer this question with a very short sentence. We don't want to read too many notes here, but what is the first thing in your mind that comes when you think of fostering women's interest in our network in the first place? So let's start do that.
Please type your questions in the question and answer box to your right. Thank you.
Okay. While you are doing that, I'm just popping up the second question. What should I do to increase our institutional representative pool?
So, Patricia, we had one response for the first question, and that was to ask women about their aspirations.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Only one response?
So far to that first question.
Okay. So let's move to the second one. So what should you do? What should I do to increase our institutional representative pool? In the state of New York, we have more than 300 independent higher education institutions. So if I just count right, if I was thinking about having one institutional representative per institution, our network should have by now 300 institutional representatives. We are not there yet. We are about 120, 130. It's increasing. But we've done some stuff to do that. I wanted just to know where you think you are in trying to increase. Mm-hmm.
I do have some responses, Patricia. So
okay.
We have one response to this question. First, increase awareness among the institutions of higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And the second response was, why do they want to serve? And then talk about the goals.
Mm-hmm.
And then for question number 2, ask women who want leadership opportunities if they would like to serve in an institutional representative position.
Mm-hmm.
And then also find ways for them to network together.
Okay, that's good.
Also, I'll just add one. I'll add 2 more. Offer awards, opportunity, or professional development for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then how are institutional representatives chosen? Does every institution have one?
Okay, this one we can answer briefly. Institutional representative, how are they chosen? Generally, they are nominated by either the president to the president, your presidential sponsor, or your presidential sponsor can ask the other institution president if they are willing to nominate someone. So this is how a number of institutional representatives in the state of New York have been identified. Someone is just a cooptation, but cooptation with the support of the president. So meaning that if we think about someone who could do a good institutional representative for an institution, we of course analyze everything that makes her a great candidate. But then after that, we are also asking the support from her president to make sure that she will represent properly her institution in our network.
Okay, I have another question, Patricia. This coordinator wrote, in my state, the network has been inactive for over 5 years, and information is not available on previous board members, institutional representatives. How do you go about selecting board members as well as institutional representatives?
Okay. First of all, if you have absolutely no archive or at all regarding what happened before you came on board, I would probably ask directly someone like Kim Bobby, for instance, here, to figure out if she had any record of discussion between the previous board members and the board liaison or the presidential sponsor in this particular state. So making sure that you cover at least all the past history. So that is something that I would do if I didn't have any archive of any sort.
And I would like to add that we have our network directory, and that's our best archive going back for several decades. And so we would just look at the directory and see what we could help you glean from the directory. And that's why it's so important when we send out those mid-monthly updates that we get good information. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kim. Okay, so let's move to the third question. Third question is, what should I do to improve our internal communication? When I say internal communication, I'm really talking at the board level, your planning group, your executive group, your steering committee, how you call it. So what is your internal communication looks like? And we will come back on this later. But I wanted to know, from your perspective, what do you think you should do to improve it?
While they're answering that question, Patricia, I do have one other statement regarding question number 2. The awareness needs to come from the upper administration. How visible is our network at the ACE national meeting so that institutional presidents will prioritize this network? We, in fact, hold our ACE State Coordinators Conference right before the ACE annual meeting. In fact, it leads into the annual meeting, and a lot of presidents are there. And we have our Women's Leadership Dinner where we have a great presence as well. So we also have our Advancing Women's panel on the first Monday of the ACE annual meeting, and that's another opportunity to become aware of the ACE Women's Network. And we really encourage the state coordinators that are in attendance to stay over that Monday and be present for that panel, and that will increase your opportunities to network with presidents. And I think that would be great for the state coordinators.
Absolutely. I think it's really a two-way information that needs to go from the state coordinators to their presidents. So that's thank you very much, Kim. I think that's essential. So do you have any response for question 3?
Yes. Responses to question 3: use online tools, Dropbox or GoToMeeting, software to connect board members who cannot physically travel. Also, use face-to-face meetings where possible. We have 2 meetings per year, one in July and one in March for planning purposes. We also do monthly calls. So these are just these are contributions from other state coordinators at how they are improving their internal communication.
Okay, that's great. That's great. We'll come back on this, and I think that's fantastic to see that people are really thinking about online communication tools. Now, same question for our external communication. What should we do? And I'm just putting the fifth question as well, is what should I do to have a strong succession plan in place?
We have a response that could be related to that. How are presidential sponsors typically chosen? And we know that they can play a key role as advisors in succession planning. Do they expect to serve in a mentorship role as you described, or are there different expectations for the presidential sponsor? Thank you.
Okay. I think that the expectation from the presidential sponsor is, first of all, to identify, of course, strong women who can sit at the board, and among those strong women, there might be, the one who is a coordinator in place, but also maybe the one who could be the following one. Or in some cases, because there are so many models and so many different situations, someone outside of the current board could take on the coordination position, I was nominated like that. So it depends if you have already a strong network in place or not so strong network in place. I would say if you have a strong network in place, and we will come back on what does constitute a strong succession plan, it will be much more formalized and smooth. If you don't have a strong network in place, then I would say the input of your presidential sponsor and your National Executive Council board liaison will be absolutely essential. Yeah.
And I would like to add here again, Patricia already pointed to the ACE State Coordinators Handbook that's online on the ACE website. That outlines the roles and responsibilities for all of the parties that make up the different leadership roles for the network. Presidential sponsors are there, as well as state coordinators, institutional representatives, and so on. I encourage you to download that or look at that handbook, because it's just being updated, and links to these webinars will be there as well. Thank you.
Yes, it has been updated very recently in the past two months, I think, Kim. And I think there are a lot of answers to most of the questions regarding that. But as I say, succession plans are maybe from different models and coming on different contexts. So it's good to have a good reflection about that. So
okay, one more response for question 3.
Okay.
To improve our internal communications, a web presence is helpful, especially for prospective members who transfer between networks or are new to administrative positions or leadership positions.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true, but I would say it's not only helpful, it's absolutely essential. And we will talk about that, in the next few slides as well. So thank you very much. And I think that, do we have any more answers, or should I continue?
One more. Does it make sense to approach new presidents, or do you want experienced ones? Who approaches the state coordinators or liaisons? Go ahead, Patricia.
Go on.
Well, the liaisons, the Women's Network Executive Council liaisons will reach out to the state coordinators and establish, a relationship with you. So that's how that works. And Patricia, I think that the question is regarding presidents. I think there's not one size fits all. I think if you approach a new president and they want to be supportive, that's generally fine. And more seasoned presidents also offer great benefits, and you can have more than one presidential sponsor for your network.
Yes, it's possible. In some geographical areas, I know that there are more than one president. It's absolutely true, and it depends on it depends on the history of the network so far. It depends on the number of people who are really willing to help the network, and the number of presidents who are really willing to be involved in that endeavor. And it depends on what the board itself, the group board, is willing to consider. Sometimes they don't want to consider more than one presidential sponsor. So it's really there are many factors. There is no one size fits all. But I think that as long as your succession plan is really well understood by all the parties, all constituencies, it will be successful.
And one more before we move on. Is this choosing done by the state coordinator or the liaison? Choosing or reaching out to a presidential sponsor can be done by the state coordinator. If they would like assistance from their liaison, that's wonderful, but that's really, the presidents in your region and your institutions, and so please feel free to reach out to invite a president to be your presidential sponsor. And once that's done, they will get a welcome letter from ACE welcoming them as presidential sponsor to the ACE Women's Network. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's, we don't want to discourage anyone to support our network. Absolutely. So let's try to go back and to these different questions here, and just make sure about small details that are really important. One of the metrics is just to make sure, especially for those who are just coming on board with a non-so-active network so far, did you have a kickoff event lately, meaning that this is the start of the year? Have you already set up a kickoff event? And when I say that, it's not that you need to have a big, full-fledged conference, from the get-go. If you are just establishing yourself, or if your network is just coming back from, a long dormant stage. But why don't you start by having a sort of a speed networking event, something very short, 2 hours on a Friday morning or Friday afternoon? Why don't you start with a 2-hour breakfast meeting with one guest, for instance, and the guest could be someone from, another network close by, or from someone from Kim's shop here who could help and figure out. Maybe your presidential sponsor, maybe your liaison could come for this breakfast event, just to give a little bit of spice to your current institutional representative, so they can feel that their aspirations and their questions are properly taken into account and answered. So I think this is something that can be done extremely easily, and then from this little success, you can build on progressively, and you can build on, in fact, quite fast if you devote, some time and energy with now an engaged board and planning group. So regional small events are really helpful. You can, if your state is geographically large, you can think about having several more regional events throughout your state. Depending on the kind of cluster of institutions that you have and the repartition of them within your state. You can also think about women of color type of events. You know that it's a strong mandate for our networks to have set aside times for women of color. It's really important that we promote and we support those efforts as well. And then, of course, when you have gone through all this, building your fully fledged annual conference will be, of course, the major moment of your mandate. But if you have not all of this, just start very small, but start one as soon as you can. It will not require a lot of expenses at all. It will be, you know, you just making the attendees pay for their refreshment, and it could be very minimal from a financial side, but so engaging if you are choosing right your first one. So that's really something that I wanted to mention. It's essential. We are launching every fall now several kickoff meetings for the year, breakfast or speed networking based on a speed dating kind of format. And that's both fun and engaging, I can tell you. Now, if you have, I heard a question regarding, I don't know what are our institutional representatives in my state. You need to assess where you are at some point. So yes, you will have probably through some archive given by either the previous coordinator, previous board, or maybe directly from Kim, you will have already an idea of who is in your state, but which institution should you approach? What we did in New York State, what I did is really to go through the directory of institutions from the New York Department of Education, New York State Department of Education. They have they have completed a comprehensive list of higher education institutions. And so once you have identified all of them, and when you have identified where you are with your current institutional representative, you can see on the regional map where you are, and if there are specific zones or areas in your states where you are underrepresented, for instance. And so once you have identified these particular higher education institutions that you would like an institutional representative to emerge from, then it would be the time to contact your presidential sponsor and ask her to contact the other president to nominate or to consider certain women for that role. And of course, the more you increase this percentage of institutional representative compared to the number of institutions you have in your state, it will be a metric of your activity and your success in that particular activity. For instance, as I said, as I mentioned, we have more than 300 independent institutions in New York, which is huge. And you know, having 50% of institutional representative compared to the number of institutions in our state is a great achievement already. So why don't you try to have this kind of metric in mind, so it will be a measure of your vitalization.
Patricia, I have a question. If you have a large network, do you plan multiple kickoff events to cover all territories of the state?
Yes, this is what we are trying to do in New York State. In fact, because of the kind of geographical extent of the state, and because we have so many institutions across the state, we decided to divide the New York State into 6 regions, and having a regional coordinator for each of those regions. And this regional coordinator is linking with a number of institutions in her particular region of the state. And each region have kickoff events and more events, of course, at the regional level. In addition to what we do statewide, such as the Women of Color Conference and the annual conference. Okay, so thank you very much. So let's move on to communication, and it was one of the questions that that was asked a little bit previously, internal communication. So I heard, you know, with great pleasure that a lot of you are using already online tools and or software face-to-face meeting were felt really essential, monthly calls. I think all of them are really important. The thing is, you need to choose really what works the best for you. For us, for instance, we were using a conference call for a long time, at least at the start, and then we transitioned to something like Skype or Zoom. In fact, Zoom.us, if you are willing to look to that. This particular style of communication allows us to make a face-to-face, but only in 2-dimension, of course, kind of meetings, which is good, much better than only phone calls, because body language is really something that helps sometimes, and also it helps in sharing documents. And these are kind of things that you can connect to from any particular device. It could be your computer, it could be your phone, it could be your camera phone, it could be your tablet, it could be whatever you have really. And so, because we are very busy ladies, most of us, we are sometimes flying to conferences or other type of meetings. It's always good to have this kind of tool so we can always connect and have good attendance to the meeting of the network. So that's really important. Excuse me. Then I think that it's also important to have a face-to-face meeting. I'm glad that someone really emphasized this. And what is important is to have you as a coordinator, a one-to-one, ideally face-to-face. It may not be always possible, but at least on a regular basis, one-to-one communication with each member of your group. And we will come back a little later about the advantage of having that. I think that paying attention, particular specific and personal attention to every member of your group is really important, because it fosters engagement, of course, but sometimes there are so many things that are unsaid during a group meeting that, of course, you understand may inflect the decision or the feedback that you are receiving in such group meetings. So it's important to either confirm something like what you have understood from that particular person during a group meeting, but to confirm that after follow-up meeting, follow-up call on a one-on-one basis, or before taking any important decisions, such as modifying bylaws or a decision about a very sensitive topic, maybe to have these one-to-one phone calls or meetings with every member which has a very specific perspective on this topic, to have such a meeting prior to the important group meetings. It also helps you to navigate and choreograph the group meetings in a much more effective way. And I would say it's also important for you to have this internal communication to figure out, what are your members actually doing? How do you monitor what they're doing? They need to make sure that they provide you with regular activity reports as well. They have a mandate, they have a job description, probably, provided by the bylaws. They have a topic to work on. Do they provide you with regular activity reports? And this is essential, because you, as a state coordinator, at the sometime, I don't recall exactly, I think it's in March or May, April, something like that came, the state coordinator need also to provide the state activity reports. And so if you don't know what they are doing, it will be much more difficult for you to say exactly what you are doing, to the Executive Council. So basically, make sure that everyone in your group is aware that they have to provide you this particular kind of activity reports. Now, of course, speaking of internal, now we're speaking of external communication. And I heard, the website remark that it's very helpful. as I say, it's not only helpful, it's absolutely essential. It's essential because this is the face of your network, the window on your work from anyone who is interested in what you are doing from the external outer world. Not only has to provide all the information about what you are doing, regarding the events you are doing, regarding the structure of your network, regarding what you are planning for, regarding the resources that you're using, the resources that you can provide anyone. It can be built with different features. You can have a public face which is open to everyone. You can have part of it as a private face for only your members, an institutional representative with specific resources from them, and also actual social networks, of course. Yes? Question?
I would like to remind everyone that at the end of this webinar, we'll have the resource link to the webinar that we did specifically on IT tools. So they'll have a more granular look at the IT tools for state networks, and so they'll have that webinar. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's essential. Beside the website, as I say, you need to build your social networks presence as well, which is also great. You need to have a Facebook page, you have to have a LinkedIn page. All these kind of things are really night and day used by all our members. It's truly important to have that. Listservs are really important to contact not only your institutional representative, but anyone that can be contacted through this network. If you capture their details, you can include them and update your listserv on a daily basis, and so you can grow your influence over your state. For any kind of marketing for your events, you can do that, of course, on the web, but the web is not, in some cases, it's not the best marketing tool for your events. I would recommend a constant contact. You can build a free account, or for a very minimal fee, you can build something a little bit stronger when you can reach out to a huge number of people throughout your state to advertise and market your events. I think we're using that for 3 years, and it's fantastic. Yeah.
I want to remind everyone, it's almost 3 o'clock, but on the webinar that was done by the IT tools, Judith went through constant contact and how to set up a website pretty thoroughly. So I would like to encourage you to go to that one because she gave some good examples. Thank you, Patricia.
Sure, thank you. Newsletters as well. The ACE Network newsletter is also available for you to provide information as well. So let me finish by 3 essential ones. Bylaws and policies, I just alluded to that. If you don't have any bylaws or internal policy, you need really to create them. It will provide not only the structure for your board, but also tools and means to make sure that when you have a problem, it's addressed correctly and sufficiently. For instance, not actively engaged people. Then with that, your framework should aim to become a 501c3 tax-exempt status. The reason is that at some point it will give you so much credibility toward other non-for-profit institutions, but also to make sure that your donors have the leisure to give to you without being tax imposed. Of course, at this point, there are also a lot of other possibilities. You can, if you are just simple associations, you may be liable for a lot of stuff, and that's not really a very good place to be. If you are registered as incorporated, that's a much better intermediate state, and probably it will be the first one that you need to make sure you can incorporate. And then after that, when you have this incorporation done, then you have to file for the 501c3 status. Again, we'll have some resources for that, and there was a webinar as well that I will refer to for that. And finally, the succession plan, as I said, is extremely important. There are so many models as well. For New York State, what we did is there is a position at the board which is the associate state coordinator, and when we elect someone in that particular position from the board, she knows that she's in fact the coordinator-elect for the state network. So this is someone who has already worked with us, with the coordinator for at least 1 or 2 years in some cases. And then when the succession arrives, when it's time for the succession, everything, the info sharing has been gradual. There has been a lot of knowledge sharing, historical sharing as well. And so when it happens, it's almost a non-event. It's a non-event from, I would say, a functional perspective, and of course it's a wonderful event when it comes to the personal side of it. So thank you very much. I think that this is what I wanted to touch on. If you have any more questions, I don't know if we have time to take.
Yes, we have just time for a few. I'll read the first one here, and I think I can answer this best, Patricia. Are copies of bylaws and policies typically maintained by ACE Women's Network for each state network? Yes, your network maintains those policies and bylaws. Hopefully you have them in a protected place on your network or in a Dropbox or some kind of resource for your members, but that is maintained by your individual networks, not by ACE. Once again, that's related to succession planning, and so those documents should be held safely for succession planning and the next state coordinators. Patricia, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If you how do networks build a budget, or do you use your institutional representative or your presidential sponsors to pay for online tools and events?
Well, what we did is really important. I think I'm glad to finish on that. When we schedule any type of event, and generally what people were doing before my time was really to know exactly how much will it cost us for, lunch, whatever, refreshment, etc., and the room renting, and then just estimated the participation fee based on those costs. Since I arrived, we changed that a little bit more, because in addition to the costs, which are the logistic costs, we added a percentage which was 10% of the revenue of these events should go to the account of the network. And finally, with all the events that we scheduled, we could build our finance well enough so we can now fund for those particular constant contact fees or whatever we need at this point. So it's important to keep in mind that covering your cost is also covering your overhead, and so don't forget to include that in your cost when you are estimating participation fee to your events.
One more question is about fundraising and budgets, and this person's asking for a webinar on the business side of the network, budgets and fundraising, and she asked about the 501c3 and webinar, which we've already done. We really do like to take your suggestions, and we sent out a survey to the state coordinators just recently, and we will try to craft webinars that meet your needs. And so we will, and sometimes we call on experts in the networks like Patricia to help us to put these kinds of webinars together. So thank you for the suggestions, and we will follow up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I wanted to I wanted to thank everyone here, and just if you want any kind of follow-up on one or two questions that you have in mind that either you didn't have time to ask, or you thought that it would be a little bit too sensitive to share with the group, please send me an email. I will be happy to schedule a one-to-one conference call with you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we're at the end.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much. And Patricia, we, as well as the Inclusive Excellence Group, thank all of the participants that joined us today. And we look forward to the next opportunity to work with you. And thank you for all the work you do out there in the network.
Thank you very much, Kim. It was a pleasure to talk to you all. And I'm glad that we had a reasonable attendance as well. It just showed that everyone is really excited to be a coordinator and making sure that everyone is willing to hear from each other. I think that cross-fertilization of ideas is probably the best training ever.